let me go right. Hey, I know everybody loves. Now, this again, we're talking about all kinds of compulsions with eating because I don't want to leave anybody out. And they did change, even with Overeaters Anonymous, they have in their introduction is for bulimia, anorexia, any kind of compulsion. I started to realize it's all the same thing. Whether you have a compulsion to overeat, undereat, whatever you do, it's that process of thinking, the distorted consciousness towards our addiction. And no matter what we try, they do say in our book here, there is in the 12 steps, there's only one solution, a spiritual solution. We tried everything else as we were just talking about. But to get to the more, before I get into that, talking about the practical application, how come I have all of these pages here, and in a lot of meetings I brought this up. First here, the health risks of overweight and obesity. But anyway, with other forms of obsession with food, if you're resisting it, you can have all kinds of problems too, physically, obviously. If you're not getting proper nutrients, or you're subjecting your body to certain things. So it says, what are some of the health risks of overweight and obesity? Now, here's the main thing here, and I talk about on page 24 in the big book. We're going to talk about this, what page 24 says, and then we're going to get right into this real practical stuff here. But 24 does say, so we get the groundwork here, and where it's in italics, and of course italics means it's important, the fact, and this is on page 24 in the big book, the fact is that most alcoholics are people with compulsions towards food, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power for choice in drink and food. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering humiliation, even a week or a month ago, we are without defense against the first drink. So here we go. I have a list of here of all the diseases, the death caused by our compulsions. And also, talk many times about other addictions. Could be tobacco, it could be alcohol, drugs, all the same thing as far as I see, or addiction to people. We could get very depressed and do harm to ourselves, and usually it's related to a problem we have with people. Resentment is the number one offender of it says in the big book. So, it could be heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, eye problems, this is nerve damage. This is all related to type 2 diabetes. It used to be called maturity onset because only older people got it. Now it's in children. So high blood pressure causes all kinds of problems, stroke and all kinds of fatty liver disease. So here we go. We talk about a practical approach. What more would you need than to read this and then to abstain? But it tells us here in the big book, written about almost 100 years ago, it's telling that no matter what, we can't do it. We tried all kinds of things, and I read in the 12 and 12 where we took the medications, the pills, we had all kinds of diets and programs, we had our stomachs stapled and all of these things and all of these things. So what more practical application do we need? And then also I have here a list of all the ingredients. So looking at these ingredients and realizing all there's 50 ingredients in the average food. So seeing all these ingredients and seeing what's going on, why it says saccharin. We're just talking before about sugar and these desserts and stuff. But a lot of them have saccharin in it, aspartame, high fructose corn syrup. Saccharin, a carcinogen found to cause bladder cancer in rats. I mean, we could go on here. Aspartame, an exotoxic that thought to be a carcinogen. They're all carcinogens. They all cause overweight, the salt, oil, and sugar the corporations put in. So here we go. We have all of this practical knowledge here. Want more practical knowledge? Here's an article. Listen to this one. Here's an article written by this one psychologist, and he was hired by all the major food companies and to work for them. And he said that it's the salt, sugar, and fat they put in the food. He calls it the bliss point. So he tried to achieve the bliss point, not only with the scientists working on it, but they had psychologists, doing interviews with people and seeing how it affected them and making just the right amounts to make us addictive. And the problem is with all of that stuff in there, it's the high caloric stuff. It's the salt, oil, and sugar. So here's a practical thing. And here, they're talking about the ingredients, talking about the diseases, talking about the big corporations and how they're just to make some money, they're poisoning us and all of that stuff. So, and the health risks I have here actually starts on page XXX in the doctor's opinion. And it says here in the third paragraph about all these and many others. You see near the bottom, the last paragraph there, have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. So it's talking about an allergy here. I'll go on to say that the phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief is entire abstinence. So here we go. The practical application is in here, and it talks about that entire abstinence. So we have this allergy, just like an alcoholic drug addict, the same thing. They have that first drink, and the phenomenon of craving, the obsession of mind, and the allergy of the body leads to the phenomenon of craving. So it's the obsession of mind, allergy of body leads to the phenomenon of craving. It goes on to say, if we go to page 23, that's what I'm looking for. Go to page 23 next. And this is really, really interesting in what it has to say here on page 23. The second sentence in the, let's read the bottom. We know that while, on the very bottom, page 22, and there is a solution. I love the name of that chapter, right? The alcoholic keeps away from the drink as he may do for months or years. He reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcoholic, we could call alcoholic foods, whatever in the system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense. So it's affecting the analogy of the body, right? Which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. You hear that? Virtually impossible. It's telling us here. So here, we're asking for practical application. It's saying here that I should stay away from these alcoholic foods. In Overeaters Anonymous, they do have the tools of recovery, and they say a plan of eating is one of them. Sponsorship, we all know what that is. Meetings, we go into meetings like we're doing now. Telephone, right? Writing, literature, action plan, anonymity, and doing service. So these are all things in the program.